Today's episode of Darkness Radio is brought to you by Microdose. Get out of pain, get out of anxiety, and start treating yourself a little bit better. Try Microdose. Microdose is a CBD THC gummy that will get you out of pain, get you out of anxiety, and get you into feeling good again. To learn more about microdosing THC, go to microdose.com and use the code DARKNESS to get free shipping and 30% off your first order. Links can be found in the show description, but again, that's microdose.com, code DARKNESS. Welcome into the best in paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Got a good show lined up for you this afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening to this podcast. We're going to dip into a few different, we'll say topics today, but it's all going to center around the psychic. But there's some interesting stories behind our guest, who's been doing his craft now of psychic work for 58 years. We've been talking quite a bit. Sometimes I wish I could take and tape the stuff we talk about before the show, because sometimes the stuff we talk about before the show is just as interesting as the stuff we talk about inside the show. But we'll try and work our way around with our guest today, Robert Lindsy Milne, as we get into the program, because there are some stuff I want to tie into what we talked about before the show. I know I'm talking in riddles and circles with you guys, but we'll get to it. It has a lot to do with his background, and there's some good stuff there. Let me tell you a little bit about Robert before we bring him in. Robert Lindsy Milne is a psychic intuitive counselor, teacher, healer, and life coach. And we're going to bring him in today to discuss his psychic life and helping people through his gifts. He's done fascinating work with a coma patient. He was able to help cure a very deadly SuperBug infection featured in the book, The Perfect Predator, which if you look in the link that we have in the description of this program, you'll be able to get that book as well. But like we said, he's a psychic intuitive counselor, teacher, healer, and life coach. He's recognized across the continent as one of the most insightful psychic intuitive counselors of his time. At a very young age, and we'll find out just how young when we get him in here, he realized his psychic gifts and started his first job working as a psychic intuitive, doing readings at the Cozy Tea Room in Toronto. Robert has traveled the world in giving insight with his psychic intuitive seasons to tens of thousands of people, and has become recognized across the continent as one of the most insightful counselors of his time. Robert has also worked with the police and Canadian Secret Service, helping to gather intel and work on missing persons cases. Currently, Robert is hosting his podcast, My Side of the Crystal Ball. You can find the show on all the popular platforms, including iHeart Radio. He's also an award-winning baker, and you can always work your way to my heart through my stomach. Let's welcome in Robert Lindsy Milne. Sir, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I was listening to what you were reading, and I'm thinking, who is he talking about? It really blows me away. When I hear stuff like that, especially when you're talking about all the things that I'm doing. My podcast and things. It's amazing.
Well, that would be you. I mean, you certainly. We were talking about no days off, and not taking that day off, and certainly working at your craft, especially when it's something you love. And that's one of the things we've been probably talking a good 25 minutes before the show. And really? That's one of the things we were talking about is
yes.
And let's talk about it right away, right off the top of the program. No days off. Whoa.
What I said, let's get our listeners catch up.
Sure.
I started working at the tea room when I was 15 and a half, worked there until I was around 21. Mm-hmm. And at the tea room, I would work 5, 6, and sometimes 7 days a week.
Sure.
And I saw lots of people, thousands. When I was 21, I left the tea room, and I heard that when a young man becomes a priest, he makes a vow to say a mass every day of his life. Mm-hmm. And I thought, and believed that doing this psychic work was what I was going to do, I made a vow that I would do a psychic reading or practice doing a psychic reading every day of my life. And I made it more than 30 years without missing a day of practice or doing a reading.
Right.
Then I missed a day because I wanted to see what it was like not to do it. And then now that at this time in my life, I'm 74 in the summer. At this time in my life, I might miss a day or two. But, at least 5 days a week, I do either a reading or practice doing a reading.
So I equivalent that to the same as a baseball player. Let's say, because, if you're talking Toronto area, I'll say the equivalent of a player for the Toronto Blue Jays. Okay.
Sure.
Getting in the batting cage, or if he's a pitcher, throwing pitches, whether it's in a ball game, whether it's in practice, or whether it's just, throwing in the backyard to the kids, keeping the arm warm,
Absolutely.
Or getting in the batting cage, hitting balls, doing whatever, but staying sharp all year round.
That's right.
Okay. So that's what I mean by no days off. Always.
Okay.
Or even reading publications or scouting reports. Sure. Always keeping the mind sharp, if not the body sharp, and always staying in the game. So no days off. That's what I mean.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, my misinterpretation.
No, because
that's great. Okay.
Because even when we were talking off air, you said even when you had taken other jobs, you were still doing things psychically.
Oh, I always worked as a psychic from 15 years old onward. But in my life, I describe it as having really interesting avocations, and I've done jobs for short amounts of time, but I still would have done psychic readings after work or before work or on weekends, and it would be my work. So and I've worked in restaurants and I 3 months in the mines and I've done a lot of things like that. And what it does is give me the experience of how people are, normal people are, because my life certainly isn't a normal life. And I go out and experience that and live amongst and work amongst people. So I understand it's to help me understand how people live, think, feel, experience.
That's an interesting statement, Robert. So do you feel detached from people almost with the work you do? Is that why you say you're working amongst
contrary. People? To the contrary, I connect with people.
Okay.
That's what I've done my whole life. So I don't feel detached from people at all.
Does the job then help you detach from things psychically and detach from people? Is it a distraction to keep you from attaching?
Contrary.
Okay.
Oh, to the contrary.
Okay.
I'm not saying I'm detached at all. So I lived on the street. Well, the first time I was 14 and a half years old. I was 14.
Okay.
And I lived through the winter in Toronto, and that's when we had like real winters. And I survived, and I survived by my psychic abilities, my awareness. I never once stole anything. I never robbed anybody, and I survived by giving service and being in a place where if I gave service, I often would receive back. Okay. And I always used my intuition, not 100%. I almost always, when I was in a crisis, had the opportunity to choose to get out of the situation, solve it using my intuition, psychic awareness, or doing something illegal or immoral. I almost always chose the psychic intuitive way, almost always. And that's true for myself today.
Okay, sure.
In a blizzard, in the middle of winter at night, sometimes children have to do things to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So I did at times immoral things to stay alive, but I never stole or robbed or attacked or, things like that.
Right.
So almost always and in those situations, there was no right or wrong choice. But the choice I made determined, I didn't know this at the time. I was, still just trying to stay warm. The choice at that time led me to the direction my life went, or whatever choice I would have made. And then when springtime came, I got caught by the police and they took me home.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following summer, I left home again. I never lived with my family full time ever again after that. And again on the streets, I again survived using my instincts and psychic ability. And often I would work at a restaurant in exchange for a hamburger. And there was one time there was a restaurant in the area, and I used to show up every day and clean off the tables and sweep the floor and stuff. And the guy recognized that I was homeless, and he let me sleep in the basement. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it was around that time I heard about the cozy tea room. Now we also have to go back even farther in my life. First psychic experience that I remember cognitively, I was about 5, and I came home from school, and I said to my mother, "Grandma Harris died today." And by the way, Grandma Harris, we're talking about 1955.
Okay.
Grandma Harris was my great-grandmother. She lived in England. I'd seen her once, and I was 5. So out of the blue, I come home, I say, Grandma Harris died. My mother got very upset, yelled at me, hit me,
Jeez.
and sent me to my room for saying bad things. Next day at dinner, my father, my mother, my sister, there were 2 more after that time period. I eventually had 3 sisters. My sister Gail and I were at the table, my mother and father. My mother said to my dad, "Grandma Harris died yesterday." And I thought my dad was going to get angry and yell at my mother and maybe hit her for saying bad things. And they just talked about it. And they just talked about it. And I remember being so confused. Like for a 5-year-old, it was very confusing.
Yeah.
And that happened a lot. So also, and I realized that, well, I didn't realize then, but, I would say, Uncle Harold, that wasn't Aunt Sally. Who was that? And I don't have an Uncle Harold, but there was an uncle I said that to, right, in a group. And that one got me hit because Aunt Sally wasn't his wife.
Whoops. Yeah.
So I used, and I didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was 9, my father took me to a Stanley Cup semifinal, Toronto and Boston, and the series was tied 1-1. They were playing in Toronto, and then the game went to to third period, and then score was tied. Mm-hmm. Teams go off the ice, have a rest, and they and when they came back on for the first overtime period, and the guys just came on and stretched a little bit, I was drawn to number 17 with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I knew, it was Gary Eman, I knew he was going to score. The game hadn't started, but I knew he was going to score. And I got really fixated. And then anyway, so the referee, blows the whistle and the teams go to the benches. And this guy Eamon wasn't even a first line stringer. And so that was in the days when the NHL was 6 teams.
Right.
And Gary Eamon was a mediocre player in the greatest hockey league in the world. Mm-hmm. Okay, so but he was still just in the middle. So he wasn't a star. He was on the bench. He wasn't a first stringer. And anyway, as the building gets quiet, and there were about 18,000 people, and as the lights went down, and the whole building gets quiet except for the lights for the rink, I couldn't hold it inside anymore. And it went from Gary Eamon was going to score to Gary Eamon scored. Just as the referee, that's what went on in my head. Yeah. And just as the referee was about to drop the puck in that dark arena that was silent, I jumped up and started screaming and cheering because Gary Eamon scored, and the entire building turned and looked at me and my dad. And he just put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Sit down." And I did. And anyway, the referee drops the puck, the game starts, and I'm not paying attention too much. I'm looking around the building. Gary Eamon comes on the ice. A guy named Red Kelly passes the puck to him, and he tips the puck into the net, and the building erupts. And I'm just looking around the building at all these people yelling and screaming. And it was then that I knew I was seeing things differently. That was the moment. And people are cheering and screaming, and the flashlights were going off, and I just saw all those people, and a 5-year-old's variation, or a 9-year-old's, what I remember back is what other people can't see, what I see. And that was the realization.
Did you see the exact moment, the way it happened when he scored? Did you see the pass from Red and all that?
No,
just that he scored.
The what I felt was the event occurred.
Okay.
And I knew what it was.
Okay.
And I realized that other people didn't. That's when I stopped getting hit for saying those things anyway.
Did the old man start taking you to more hockey games and putting money down then? Is that what happened?
My father had no idea what happened.
Huh.
He never considered. And in fact, my father, my family was horrified that I did what I did, what I chose to do for my job, for my career. I was ostracized. But my father said that he would go to his grave believing his only son was a fraud and a charlatan.
Really?
And by the way, he did. And my father also said that I was the only guy he ever met that never had a job.
Mm.
So I know it sounds terrible. However, I just want to go back to those days. So I realized over that time that I didn't quite, that I was seeing things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, my sister Gail and I, we used to get 25 cents for an allowance.
Mm-hmm.
And on Saturday mornings, and we would go to the movies. And for 25 cents, you'd see like 2 feature movies and 2 big, 2 or 3 cartoons and a serial movie. You get a box of popcorn, a soda, as you call it in the States. We call it pop.
We call it pop in Minnesota too.
Oh, okay. And candy. Yep. That was for a quarter. So after the game that Thursday night, when Eamon scored the goal, Saturday morning, And Saturday night, Boston and Toronto were playing a game. And it comes time, we're waiting for our allowance. And, I come up to get my quarter. And I said to my dad, Boston's going to win tonight. And he said, whatever the equivalent of no way. And I said, I'll bet you my quarter. And he took the bet. And I didn't get my allowance, and I didn't go to the show that day. But at the end of the game that night, I had 2 quarters instead of 1. And for years, I hustled him I had to let him win because I was afraid I was going to get caught. And he never figured it out, ever.
Wow.
And he did. He only died like 2 years ago. And he still, believed that what I did was, bullshit, or what I do is bullshit.
Even though you were hustling him for quarters.
He never figured it out.
But okay, Robert, you got to forgive me here. So he says you're a charlatan and a fake, but yet you're calling sports games. I mean, and you're just...
So here's the really important lesson that I learned from him.
Okay.
And a lot of people. So I don't care if people believe in being psychic.
Okay.
I don't care. Mm-hmm. And I never try to convince somebody that psychism is real. And here's the reason.
Okay.
Trying to convince somebody about something, being psychic, mm-hmm. as an example, mm-hmm. is like describing the color purple to somebody who was born blind. You're not going to be able to do it. And all that's going to happen is that person's going to think you're a dickhead, and you're going to think that guy's a dickhead. Yeah, so true. I don't care because you do or you don't. So I don't care. There's something interesting too. I don't care if somebody has a reading from me either.
Really?
Yep. I don't care personally until the person makes an appointment, and then we have a whole different game. But I don't sell what I do. I don't convince. I don't do things to inspire people to come and have a reading from me. Well, I do. I just present myself and demonstrate my abilities, and they can do it or not. And by the way, since my mid-20s, mm-hmm. and up until now, mm-hmm. I have and do guarantee my work absolutely forever. So if I do a reading for you today, mm-hmm. from that day and until the ending of my life or yours, I absolutely guarantee you that you will feel that you received a good service. It was of value. It was good for you, and you were satisfied with it.
Wow.
If for any reason you feel you did not get value, I just give you back your money. You're never getting a reading from me again. But if I would have done a reading for you 30 years ago,
okay,
and you came to see me now, and you say, I got a reading from you, man, like 30 years ago, and it sucked, I'd say, I am so sorry, and I would give them back their money. They're not getting today's money back. Mm-hmm. I give them back the principal.
Huh. That is, I got to say, Robert, that's impressive. I've never heard of anybody who would do that.
Do you know why?
Why is that?
I was trying to prove to my father that I was moral, mm-hmm. that I was honest, and what I did was legitimate. it took a very long time to realize that I was never going to be able to make him or show him. But I liked the way it felt, giving guarantee the way I do.
Wow. It's
in the old days when I recorded. Oh, by the way, I started recording in the 1970s, and I will not do a reading unless it gets recorded. And you get the recording, right? Yeah. Well, in those days, you were the only one, because it would be difficult to have 100,000 recordings. Sure. And I started off using cassettes, and then up to CDs. And so in those days, it was give me back your reading, and I'll give you back your money. Now, because I didn't want them to have the actual solid work, and their money too. So give me that back, and I'll give you your money back. Now, everything's done digitally, and I just say, here's your money back. And also, there's something else. I also, just because somebody books an appointment and has the money to pay me for a reading, that doesn't mean that I will do the reading, or I'll even complete the reading. And the readings that I do become my clients when I finish the reading and decide that I've done the absolute best that I can. And if I haven't done the best that I can, I'll tell them I'm very sorry. There's no charge.
Let me ask you this, Robert.
Or I will realize that this person that I'm connecting with, I am not in clear connection with, and I'll tell them I'm sorry. I can't give you my best.
Okay, that answers one of the questions I was going to ask you about that. What other factors would keep you from taking somebody? Is it a vibe about them? Is it something that comes up as your actually it's not that esoteric at all. Okay. Here's what it is. Sure.
We've got, I think it's a little over 7 billion people on the planet. Okay. All right. Yep. So let's pretend, because I'm not that good with numbers, let's pretend there's only 6,000 or 6 million. Okay. Sorry, 6 billion people. Okay. People on the planet. Okay. Because it's easier to do the numbers. Okay. Take those 6 billion people on the planet, line them up shoulder to shoulder. At one end of the spectrum, there's 25%, 1.5 billion, and they hate your guts. They just do. Okay. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Sure.
They'll hate your guts if you try to do something about it, and they'll hate your guts if you don't. That's the way it is. All right. The other end of the spectrum, there's another 1.5 billion, 25%, and they love you. They just absolutely adore you. And there's nothing you can do about it. If you try, they'll still love you. And if you don't, you still love you. And then there's another 3 billion that goes from the happy side to the unhappy side. And from one side to the other. And basically, you have free choice and free will to connect with anyone you want. So there are people that I get along with far better than other people.
Okay.
Now, those other people that I don't get along with, or don't get along with me, have other people in their life that they do get along with. So somebody that I'm not clearly in tune with, if I do a reading for them, they're not going to get the best of me that somebody else could. And there's another person in the world around them, that person, that can give them that.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I can give to the people that I can give the most to, the best to. That's how I do it. Now, if there were an emergency, life, death, I most likely wouldn't say no.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would most likely say no. Wouldn't say no.
Right.
But there have been times I have said no.
I could see that too.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because you see, what we are one way, we are equally the opposite, by the way. And the idea is recognizing that that we are as good as we are bad. We are as accomplished as we are failure. We are as high as we can be low. What we are one way, we are equally the opposite, and we can be that at any time. And the idea is recognizing that what we are one way, we are equally the opposite. So on one day, I can be the nicest person in the world. Well, hey, guess what? In order to be the nicest person in the world, you also have to be the worst person in the world as well. Mm-hmm. You can't be anything but the opposite. And so because I really, and by the way, the point is to stay balanced. Okay. Not eliminate negative, not over focus on positive, to stay balanced, and continue to grow, and we will grow each way. I recognize that, and I really, my thing these days, my motto, is at the end of my podcast, my sign off is do good, stay safe, above all, just be kind. And when you look at my Facebook pages and things like that, it's all about giving service, being kind, mm-hmm. Focusing on, and I live that a lot.
Yeah,
I didn't say I did it all the time. I would like to, but I sometimes I'm a jerk.
Well, I would hope we would all do that, though. That we would all be kind and live a life of service.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I can't do very much about anyone else.
Yeah.
I sort of focus on what I can do. So if I act like a jerk, and I have and done. At this time of my life, I do my best to go up and make it right. Mm-hmm. So, I'm getting, working on the spiritual side where, I have the control that I don't have to go up and apologize. And so I won't be, keep it all balanced. And, who knows, that might be the day I die, but you never know. So I believe giving my best to the people that I can give my best to. And there are others that can give their best to that person that they need. And that's why I do it that way.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Sometimes there's some tough information that will come through in a reading to someone.
Yeah.
Do you believe in boundaries? Do you believe in sugarcoating something? Would you do something like give somebody a potential date of death if it came through?
When I do readings, okay, so that is, it sounds like a yes or no answer. But it's not. It's a pretty complicated question.
Okay.
Okay, it really is a complicated question.
Sure.
Would I sugarcoat it or would I be direct? Well, depends on the situation, as well as the technique of my technique. So when I do a reading, I regularly see someone's life from conception to completion and everywhere in between. And when I am doing readings, I'm constantly going forward and backward in time.
Okay.
When I'm doing the reading. And when I'm tuned in and doing a reading, what I'm talking about isn't necessarily what I'm thinking. What I'm talking about has already been processed and is coming out my mouth. Mm-hmm. I'm also thinking about what I'm going to be saying next. At the same time, I'm also looking at what's going on in that person's life 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now. And I'm also looking back in their life all at the same time, where they've been and what's happened to them. It's like having 4 or 5 TV screens on the wall,
Okay.
and each one with a different channel. And I'm going back and forth. So when I do readings, my purpose is to give information and heal. And what I do, everything I do in my work, when someone comes to me for a reading, is set to make them feel calm, relaxed, safe. And it starts from the moment they book an appointment with me. So when I do readings for someone, what I do if I come up with something that's bad, okay, I look into the future. Say someone's 40. I look into the future when they're 80 or 85. If they're that old, I'll look into them, certainly to where they're older. And then I'll look back, and I will then tell them the positive result of the negative experience they're going to be going through. But I don't tell them about the negative experience. Then what I do is I come back into the present or around and give more information, and then I'll drop a little hint that there's something coming.
Okay.
And then I'll change the subject, and I go back into the future in my mind, and then talk about the positive result of this, the things that's going to be happening to this person. And sometimes I'll take 35, 40 minutes to get to that point. And I'll come back and, embellish it, expand it. And by the time I give them the information, they've already figured it out.
Okay.
And they're not panicked. So I take a long time to give that information, but I give it, and when they get it, they know they're going to get through it.
And it's digestible at that point.
Indeed so.
Okay.
And when I'm also doing readings for people, like, say, when they are coming in, and what I see, what I also do is someone's in the midst of a crisis. I'll look into the future, look back through their eyes from 25 or 30 years into the future, and I will describe to them today how they feel about the way they solved the problem they're going through.
Okay.
You know how fucking healing that is? You should see. I get so choked up when I see, like, when people come to me, they're afraid, and their eyes are sharp, and their faces are stiff, and they're frightened, and when they leave, and I don't pull punches.
Yeah.
When they leave, their face is relaxed, and they're smiling, and their eyes are bright, and I get so touched when I see that. It's just such a glorious experience. And I also go back into the past, and I'll talk about things that happened to them, and I'll describe it to them in words that they will understand, that I understand what they're feeling. And I talk about those things, and I bring them out on the table. And the whole purpose of my reading is to heal, help, and direct that person, to give that person the information so that they can use it in the best way that they can.
Okay.
And I guarantee it will be, or I'll give you back your money.
All right. There you go.
I got all choked up over that when I was talking about when I was seeing, and after like 58 years, I still get touched. Actually, maybe even more so.
Because I think you're able to put yourself right in that moment, and you know what that moment feels like. I don't think that moment ever gets old because you're right in the moment of emotion, and you Absolutely. Feel that emotion every single
Absolutely.
time.
I was, and I do, and I do.
Yeah, exactly.
I do my work better now than I ever have. I see things in ways and on levels I've never imagined. Mm-hmm. The only thing is that I can't do it as much, and I can't do it for as long. And that's the only thing. But if there were ever a time in my life that I would get a reading from me, it would be right now.
Yeah.
This would be the period, because I've never loved doing what I do the way I do now. Although I've always loved doing what I do, but this is,
What is it about this period right now that makes you love it so much?
Oh, it's about me. It's not. I'm so selfish. It was. I'm in my commitment, my service. I've never done it as well as evolved. I've never been so aware. Mm-hmm. It's that's what makes it so beautiful. And here I am. About to turn 74. I was on about 40 podcasts last year. Okay. I have my own podcast. Mm-hmm. I do readings. I did more shows last year than I would have done in 5 years when I was in the peak of my career. The reason for that is I had to go from city to city.
Right.
I didn't have to just sit in front of my computer.
True.
It was embodied. Right. I did more readings, but I didn't have to go there. So I completed things and had the opportunity to do things that has been, helped my career expand. Actually, I'm getting more recognition now than I did even at the peak in the prime of my career. After 58 years, I'm an overnight success.
So technology really is making it, I guess, the world smaller and making it an easier game. Is that the way you'd put it?
It made it possible for me.
Yeah. That's a good thing. I tell you what, Robert.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, we could take a break right here.
Okay.
When we come back,
sure.
Let's get into how you're able to help the Canadian Security Service. And
I was talking with a KGB agent, had direct contact.
Yeah, let's get into that as well. That's pretty interesting. And then let's get into the topic of the book.
Perfect Predator,
and talk about the SuperBug and talking to someone who's in a coma, which is extremely interesting. We'll do that when we come back. Our guest is Robert Lindsy Milne, psychic intuitive counselor, teacher, healer, and life coach. Again, we have a link in the description of this program to Perfect Predator, the book that we'll talk about in the second half of the program. When we come back, we'll talk about KGB agents. We'll talk about superbugs. We'll talk about talking to a person in a coma and much, much more. You're listening to the best in paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Our guest is Robert Lindsy Milne, psychic intuitive counselor, teacher, healer, life coach. And let's face it, folks, 58 years in the business is, we could just say guru. We'll put it that way. Robert, my friend, you've had quite the career, and you've had some interesting experiences at that.
Yes.
Let's start with how you were able to help the Canadian Secret Service or Security Service. I'm sorry. Canadians, we call it the Secret Service here. They call it the Security Service.
At the time, it was a division of the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and these guys were in the Security Service. Now our Security Service now, I think, is called CSIS.
Okay.
And it's not involved with the RCMP now, but it was several years ago. It certainly was during the Cold War. So this would be in the mid 70s. And I had just come to the realization that I can do radio shows and do readings on radio shows. And I had a Sunday night show in Niagara Falls. It was on CJRN. It was a call-in show doing, phone and psychic readings. And when I landed that gig, it wasn't the first show I'd ever been on. When I landed that one, then I could call other radio stations and say, "Hi, this is Robert Lindsy Milne from, CJRN in Niagara." Yeah, and the news director or the program director would take my call because I was from and then I'd give my pitch and then try to get on a show and then go to that station and do the show. And I had done that on an Ottawa radio station, and I was auditioning for the show, and the way I had to fly to Ottawa and appear on the talk show and do calls, and they'd never had anybody do that before, take calls. First time. So anyway, I was flying there. And I was flying there, and I it was just going to be it was just a turnaround. I flew there, plane landed, I went to the station, got the job, flew back to Toronto, and a couple of days later. Now we're talking about 1970s, so the world is very different than what it is today.
Right.
Phones were attached to the wall, and they had dials, and just introducing area codes and things like that. So a few days after I got back, the program director from that radio station in Ottawa called me, and he said, I got a call from this guy from the Soviet embassy. And I said, yeah. And he told me the guy's name. And he said, he is a journalist with TASS News Agency. And I said, yeah. And the guy said, and he's a spy too. And I said, okay. And he said he wants to interview you. And I said, I don't want anything to do with this, please. Just, I'm not interested. I don't want to hear from the guy. I don't want to know about it. Please, just don't give him my number. And again, in those days, we only had phone books.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult to find somebody if you didn't know where they were, where they lived even, then you'd have to have that city's phone book, and you couldn't just go to the library. It was difficult. So I told him, don't tell him I'm not interested. And I was firm. A few days after that, I started getting phone calls from my friends saying, Robert, this guy from the Mounties was asking questions about you. And that happened 3 or 4 times. And I'm thinking, oh, shit, what's going on? Because I still hadn't broken any laws. And I'm thinking, whoa, what's going on? Then I get a call from a guy who phones me and says, Mr. Milne, this is Sergeant from the RCMP Security Service. Myself and my partner would like to come and have a discussion with you about a non-criminal matter. And I said, does that have anything to do with the Russian guy in Ottawa? And he said, yes. And I said, I'm not interested. Please leave me alone. I just don't want to be involved. And then he said that it was important that we talk. and that he asked, would I please just give them a few minutes, and that his partner is going to be flying in from Ottawa, and they arranged the time. So they came in, and they, they were guys wearing suits. They didn't even carry guns, but they were the Canadian spies. They were our guys, right? Mm-hmm. And one guy's name was Paul, and the other guy's name was Del. Anyway, they explained the situation, mm-hmm. and they said, this man is indeed a journalist for TASS. However, he lives at the Soviet embassy, and he has diplomatic passport. And then they said he also has spent his entire career in Washington. And all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, he got transferred from Washington to Ottawa. That's not a promotion.
No.
That is like demotion.
Yeah.
The Mounties thought, okay, now this was in the time of the Brezhnev era, the ending of the Brezhnev era.
Okay.
And this guy had been one of Brezhnev's guys. That's why he had, or a relative, that's why he had the cushy job at the Soviet embassy in New York, in Washington.
Okay.
That was the reason. He was a relative or something, and Brezhnev was losing control, and he got demoted. Our guys thought that this guy was worried about getting called home to Russia and then getting sent to Siberia. And he was reaching out to me to get a reading. He said, that was the thing. But what happens, at radio stations in cities like Washington or Ottawa or whatever, they're often in touch with the staff at the embassies. They have a working relationship, so it's not unusual for a journalist, Russian German, with the contact a radio station. They know each. They just interact, but they interact with lots of people. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the Mounties wanted me to meet this guy because they believed he was reaching out to defect.
Oh, okay.
That's what they thought. And I said that I didn't want anything to do with it.
I don't blame you.
And then they said, this is really an important thing because he's really high up. And if he would defect, he has a lot of valuable information. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And they briefed me. Mm-hmm. And then, when it was time for me to go back to do my first show on the show I made it on, the Mounties then, they took care of arranging my hotel. And on the day that I was flying to do the show, they came to my house, and I went to the airport in a private car with like three other guys and like three giants in the car, and then we get out of the car, and I'm like 5'7" maybe, yep. And these guys were like 6'6" or what I just anyway. Then we get to the private part of the airport and get into a government plane and fly to Ottawa and go to the hotel. And I had told the radio station that I would do it. The radio guy told the Russian guy that I was coming into town. I'd be staying at this hotel, blah, blah, blah. And so that's how it got set up. So, and then on the plane and when we got to the hotel, it turned out that I had a room with two adjoining rooms. And on both sides were, a bunch of Mounties. 4 or 5 guys on each side, and using, the latest 1970s, spy equipment, and that their rooms were wired, and in my room was too. And they gave me his background. That was the first time in my life, and the last time I ever allowed myself to get coached before doing a reading. That was the first time and the last. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. And then they said, now, when he comes in, I just want you to know he's a big guy, and he's probably going to sit really close to you. Don't get nervous. He said, they're more tactile than what we are. Okay. Russians, they're and they're more gregarious. And he said, now they're more tactile, and he might even touch you on the arm and stuff like that. And he said, the guy's not coming on to you. Just remember, they have a different culture, and they get closer, and that actually was a big help. So he comes in, sits down. I start to do what I was coached to do with the Mounties. Oh, there was one thing. Mm-hmm. They gave me his dossier, or went over it with me, and they said, okay, somewhere when you're doing your reading, say something, and it was something like this. Sometimes we get into trouble, and we think we have no friends, and then we discover we have friends that have their arms open to us, or something like that. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
It was, this was, I was 27. So anyway, I start doing the reading for the guy, and it turns out everything I had been coached was wrong.
Really?
Yeah. So I just pushed that out of the way, started doing my regular reading, and then I say to him, and sometimes, blah, 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 blah. And then with friends have arms out, and he just looked at me, stood up, turned around, and walked out of the room, just left, just like that. And didn't say goodbye, or just got up and left, walked away. And I was just sitting there with a tape recorder going. Mm-hmm. And then, the guys came in and said, oh, way to go, Robert. That was great. And I said, I scared him off. And they said, no, you didn't. And he said, in those days anyway, mm-hmm. Anytime you mention or hint about defection around the Russians, that's what they do. That's how they handle it. And I thought, oh, okay. And he said, because they're always being watched.
Huh.
And the guy said, we might never know what happened. So they were happy with what I did. They were impressed because some of the things that I had done. And the guy and incidentally, in those days, there was more intelligence passed across the American and Canadian border at Niagara Falls than anywhere in the world. And there was a CIA outpost or whatever on the American side, mm-hmm. and an FBI, and we had a major station in Niagara Falls. And this guy from the Canadian guy called me a few days later, and he asked me, could I find things? I said, sure. And I never went looking for things before, but yeah. Sure, I'll give it a try. Sure. And they said, well, we're looking for dead letterboxes. And what we'd like you to do is come down here, look at some maps, go through the park, and a dead letterbox is where they pass intelligence. Okay. And what they wanted me to do was find where the dead letterboxes were. So I went down there and looked at maps, and I don't know what I was doing. It seemed like a good idea to put my hand over the maps. Never done that before. And then I said, I feel strong here, and then we went into the park and found them. And I went down to Niagara Falls every month for almost 2 years, looking for and finding dead letterboxes. And then there was this one point we were out in the park, and the guy that recruited me said, remember your Russian friend? And I said, yes. And he just said, it worked out.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's all I heard. That's all. he just said, remember your Russian friend? It worked out. It never went beyond that. I assumed he made the switch.
Wow.
Anyway, so now.
Now let me ask you real quick, Robert. Did it go from Brezhnev to Gorbachev? I don't remember. Was that the
no
switch of power?
Brezhnev and Gorbachev was a little bit longer. The president in about 1976 either would have been Nixon or Ford.
Well, I mean, as far as Russian power, did it go?
Yes. So Ford never dealt with Gorbachev. Gorbachev was in the Kennedy era. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Reagan.
The Reagan era.
Yeah, Reagan era.
Sorry, yeah.
I'm trying to remember who took power after Brezhnev.
It was another dictator, and he was kind of a buffoon kind of guy.
Yeah, I just don't remember who it was. So okay, so I'm just.
So wait, there's more to that story.
Okay, go ahead.
So on the flight going to Ottawa, the first time, I met a stewardess on Air Canada. And when I stayed over the first time, when I was flying to Ottawa to stay over, she was on the plane as a stewardess, and we met. And it turned out she was staying at the same hotel I was staying at.
Okay,
and we became friends, and you know. About a year later, we were living together, and I was living as this, Air Canada flight attendant, Eleanor, and I were living together. And she did trips with Air Canada, and the flights were called in the business. It was called a Havana turnaround.
Okay,
they would take a plane load of passengers, fly them to Havana, drop them off, and bring home the ones that were leaving. And they would, it would be fly down, fly back. That was called a Havana turnaround. It was at night. And by the way, I never personally went to Cuba. I wouldn't go because of the communist
regime.
Communist regime there.
Okay,
I wouldn't go. Some Canadians went. They got a much cheaper vacation, but they helped they helped an enemy stay strong by going and giving them money. And so I would never do that because they were communists, they were Marxists, and that's cancer for democracy.
Right.
So I never went, and I actually have that's the loudest opinion I've ever made before. I usually stay out of politics, but Eleanor would fly back and forth, and I'd pick her up in the morning. And this one morning, when I picked her up and she got in the car, and she had this big brown envelope in her purse, and I said, "What's that?" And because she didn't leave with it, I said, "What's that?" And she said, whatever the girl's name was in Havana at the gate. She said, so-and-so asked me to bring this back and mail it to her friend. And I said, really? And I looked at the envelope, and it was addressed to East Germany. And I said, who is this woman? And she said, she's from the island, and she's really wonderful, and she's friends with all the stewardesses, and we bring her stuff in, and things, and we mail these magazines to her friends overseas and stuff. And I called my friend in Niagara Falls, and I said, Del, what does this sound like to you? And he said, just sit by the phone. And he called back like 10 minutes later, and he said, this guy's going to call you from Toronto. He's from the Cuban desk. And he came up, and seems like we broke a spy ring. They'd been doing it for years.
Oh, wow. Wow. So you kind of joined the service there for a minute there,
Things
Robert.
like it, yeah. And I did 3 things for them, and it was over a period of 2 years, 2.5 years.
So I take it things didn't last with Eleanor?
Oh, well, that certainly is. This is not one of the stellar parts of my existence, dealing with her. Although I loved her dearly. Well, and you know, she still lives in my heart.
Well, sure, but country over a small affair. That's what.
That's right.
That's right.
So that was my espionage experience.
That's interesting. That's really interesting, my friend. Wow. You know,
I'd forgotten about it, you know.
Well, hey, I mean, it's a good time to remember it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, it comes back. You know, I didn't, like say, I forgot about it. It wasn't like, it was just one of the things that came along in what I was seeing as my magical life.
That's
because I was doing things like that. So it was magical, but I thought it was just like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you did the right thing. A lot of people would just kind of turn a blind eye, you know? I mean, especially if, if you got a good looking woman.
Well, those guys also had a really big expense account. And after we, did the work, there was like some pretty serious parties.
Oh, well, there you go. I mean, that's a side benefit as well.
We're talking, all the things that you're saying is at 73 and a half was different than when I was 27. Yeah. Or 26, and I saw the world differently than I do now, very differently. And it was a fun time.
I hear you there. Have you had experience too with helping the police as far as missing persons?
I have, and not willingly.
Okay.
And I never do it for money. Mm-hmm. And if I ever get involved, I have to have agreement that nobody will know that a psychic's been involved.
Okay.
And I just won't have anything to do with that. So
why is that? If I can ask real quick before you tell us more about it, why do you not want to be associated on that level or not let people know that a psychic was involved?
Because I don't have what it takes to tell somebody, because usually in these things, the person's dead. Mm-hmm. And I don't have what it takes to tell a mother or a father or someone that their child's dead.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The other thing is, how do you get paid for that?
Well, I most psychics that I've talked to who've helped out the police don't ask for money. They just don't.
Of course.
Yeah.
But what happens if you start doing it though? You put it in your practice. How much do you charge?
You just can't. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So now you get involved in something that's going to rip your guts out, mm-hmm. put you on the sidelines for a while, and it just is too hard to do.
Yeah.
So if I get involved, I never want the parents to come to me or things like that. I just want to help that way. I don't get paid, but I don't want any recognition. So we have to go back in time again. Mm-hmm. Until 2019, in Canada, there was the Witchcraft Act, and it was initiated or passed in the late 1800s, and for 100 years. this was in force, and it started off with anyone who, and it's assumed it's fraudulent, anyone who fraudulently tells fortunes for a consideration, uses an occult or crafty science to give medical advice, use an occult or crafty science to accuse somebody of a crime, is punishable by a summary conviction of not more than $5,000 and not more than 1 year in jail.
Oh, wow.
That was on the books until 2019.
Wow.
So, yeah. So up until that time, 2019, every day of my work life, I could have got busted. Never did. Never really got hassled by it. And, I'm sure in the last 60 years, it wasn't even used. It sat on the books.
Mm-hmm.
Incidentally, on the day that fortune telling got made legal, that was also the day, July 1st, 2019, was the day that cannabis was made non-criminal as well. I'm not sure if there is a connection, but they both happened on the same day.
Well, 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yes. So anyway, in my early career, when I was touring, and I would almost always tour with a full-time secretary. Mm-hmm. And in the early days, I wouldn't have enough money to pay for, the airplane ride to the first city away or the hotel rooms. So there were little radio stations in the area that I could go to quickly and do a show and then get readings. And Barrie, Ontario, a little bit north of Toronto. And we're talking about now into, I was driving a Fiat 8. All right, so it was in the early 1980s. And Barrie was just north of Toronto by 75 miles. And it was the most successful city I went to in my career. Now, not the most amount of money, but the most amount of return with dollar for dollar than anywhere around.
Okay.
So I would drive up to Barrie in the morning. I was booked on a show. I'd drive up to Barrie in the morning. I'd book into a motel. And then I would drive to the radio station by myself, do the call-in show and say, hey, if you want a psychic reading from me, come and see me at the Bayshore Inn down by the bay. I'd run like hell or drive like hell to the hotel. And I'd answer the phone, do a whole bunch of book a whole bunch of appointments. I do 8, 9 in that day and 8 or 9 the next morning, right? Take that money, jump in my car, drive back home, and then that would prepare me to go to the next city where I could get a hotel room. And that was just getting my front money. That's how I did it all the time, right? And then the next city would get the airfare,
Wow.
There were a few times where I'd show up in the city and I wouldn't have enough money to pay for the first night at the hotel. So I just asked to speak to the manager, and I tell the manager that, that I was here with CFRA broadcasting tomorrow. I'm on the air. I lost my wallet on the plane. I don't know what the hell, but they'll take care of it. And they say, oh, sure, come on in. And that's how I got, that's how I survived through those early years touring. Anyway, so I'm doing one of those Barrie turnarounds, and the first night, it was 7:30, 8 o'clock. I'm doing the reading. There's a knock on the door, and there's 2 cops. They were detectives, and they wanted to speak to me. And I said that I'm doing readings, and they said, well, they wanted me to help them, and I said, well, I didn't want to, and they said, well, we want to talk to you, and if you want to do readings in Barrie, you have to talk with us. And I said, okay, I will. But after I do my readings. And then they said, okay. And I finished the night and I had the money for even gas to get back home, and I had that anyway, and or I had that for bail then. Anyway, they took me down to the police station, and they told me about this woman, this person that was missing, and it was quite dramatic because I remembered a couple of months previous. When it had happened, because it made the news in Toronto. So here's this super upstanding young woman, married with a child. I think she's a nurse, and she's known as Miss Reliability. And she's structured and she does everything the right way. And anyway, she had a day off. And she was driving her son to the daycare center, and she was having a haircut and a beauty treatment. And she drove to the Center Point Mall, and the beauty salon was right where she parked, and she got out of her car, and no one ever saw her again. Disappeared, just disappeared. And God, she never made it to the beauty salon, nothing. They just, no sign. This had gone on for a while, and there were no leads, nothing. And, it was going dead. And the guys in Barrie they just ran out of resources. So they said, let's give this guy a try. And they told me, and when they told me who they were looking for, I knew a bit about it. So I'd done the maps with the Mounties. So I just thought, let's do it that way. And we put the, maps on the table, and I did that. And I said, oh, well, here's an area. And then I said, oh, by the way, you're not going to find her tonight. You're not going to find her tomorrow. You're not going to find her till about April. However, what you will see where she'll be near is a abandoned train trestle, and you'll see 1910 on it. And these guys got really, horny over that one, and they wanted to go out in the snow then, and we did. And they were driving around, and all of a sudden we go into this dilapidated or overgrown area, and we dive down this dark dirt road, and we drive up and we see a train trestle. This was 1910. And then these guys looked at me and went, oh, and they started taking me pretty seriously. And I just said, you're not going to find her until about April, but you're going to find her in this area. And that would have been, late October, early November for me. Anyway, they let me go, and I did my readings the next day, drove back, and then I think the next city I went to was Sarnia. Mm-hmm. And a little while, the next April, one of those cops got in touch with me, and they said that after we talked, they sent a search party out in the same area. They couldn't find her, but just the other day they did another search party, and they found her body right near the train trestle.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So, do you suppose that body hadn't even been there yet? That it had been moved to that area sometime during the spring or early spring, late winter?
I'd never considered that.
I got to think.
I'd never. Well, you see, for me, I really don't care very much about how I get information or where it comes. I'm interested in I'm an answer-oriented person.
Yeah.
So in mathematics, if you have a mathematics exam, mm-hmm. If you just give the prof the answer, yep, you're not going to pass, and you're not going to get all the points, mm-hmm. because you get points for showing how you got the answer.
Right.
Well, my job is the answer.
Right.
It doesn't matter how you get it.
Exactly.
So my focus is, what's the answer?
Mhm.
And I don't think the why and wherefore. I look for the answer, and as soon as I do, it's done, and I go next.
I just, to me, that just seems like the logical conclusion that somebody.
Because you're more logical than me.
Well, not necessarily, Robert. Just that I mean, you were adamant in that the motive is actually in the answer. In that you said the body wasn't going to be there until April. You're not going to find it.
No, that's not what I said. I said you won't find her till April.
Yeah, you won't find her till.
I didn't say the body wasn't there.
Oh, I just that you wouldn't find her.
You won't find her till April.
Right.
But when you do, it'll be around April, and near where you'll find her is the abandoned trestle. I wasn't. I didn't consider. I didn't even the first time I'd considered what we're talking about is right now. It just seemed the answer was they wouldn't find her until April near the train trestle.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care anything about before or after.
Right. So I don't know. It's just
now that sounds pretty cold, but
no, but I mean,
oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sound cold at all. It's just that you get the information you get, and you have to disseminate what you get. You can't speculate, because if you speculate, you're not being true to the information
Absolutely.
you're given.
That's exactly. Did you say gift?
No, you're given.
That you're
given, right? Whereas I can sit here as an observer and say, well, to me, in my, because I also do a true crime show as well.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. So I can sit here and go, well, duh, to me that makes sense, because if they've done searches and been around that area and dug up what they've dug up, that body is not in that area. Well, of course it's not in that area, because it wasn't there to begin with. It was moved.
Okay.
It was moved to that area. So,
all right. Yeah. See, I'm not interested in how it got there. I'm not interested how it gets away from there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about anything else other than that's it.
Yep. And
then when that's it, it's also that's it for me too.
Yep.
On the case.
Yep. Because you, and I'm not calling you a tool, Robert. I'm just saying that you're one tool in the investigation, or you're one tool that's used to solve the investigation.
That's right.
So yeah, exactly.
Well, I've been called worse.
No, I'm not calling you a name, my friend. That's I'm just saying that's just one.
Well, I know.
One tool used to solve the case. That's all. Let's talk a little bit about the perfect predator, and tell us how you helped a coma patient and help cure a very rare disease. We'll cover just light points in here, because of course we want people to go get the book and read a little bit about it.
I did not write that book.
Right. And we'll
I am
clarify
not the star of the book.
Right.
Although my role was life-saving.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to do so. The man and the woman, Stephanie Strathdee and Tom Patterson. Stephanie Strathdee got her first reading from me a little more than 30 years ago. And she got her reading when she just completed her PhD in epidemiology.
Okay.
And she's been a client and a close friend for all those years.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband, and now, by the way, Stephanie is a professor of epidemiology at the University of California, associate dean of the epidemiology department at California University, as well as she's famous for her writings and research on AIDS, and she is an acclaimed epidemiologist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's a heavyweight type. Mm-hmm. And her husband Tom is a professor, has a PhD in psychology, experimental psychology, and a PhD in psychiatry. And he's a professor of the psychology department and an associate dean. And Tom is a guy about 6'5", mental giant as well.
Okay.
And he's in his late 60s and might then or early 70s. And Tom, I think of Tom as an old Indiana Jones kind of scientist type.
Okay. Sure.
That mentality. He's a man's man. And in his early days, he did research in the jungles in South America and got captured by the Sandinistas and, nearly starved to death in one of their work camps. And, he's a man's man, and he's a genius, and he's a good guy too.
Oh, wow.
There's a difference in age. They're both Stephanie and Tom, second marriages. Tom also had been a client of mine. Tom, this giant, had grown really big and put on and went up to well over 300 pounds.
Okay.
So I was doing a reading for Tom, and it's the way I give information, and I said, I can do this now because the book has been written. So this is in the book. So I can do this. I talk about these personal things about a specific person.
Okay.
And so, and it only happened just a couple of years ago, so it's fresh. So anyway, I told Tom that, well, first of all, what I said, and this is going to be like the Coles Notes version. First of all, what I said is, in 3 years from now, you're not going to like the way your clothes fit on you because they'll be so big. And in 3 years from now, you're going to lose more than 100 pounds. So that's what I said to him. And then I started doing his reading, and I talked about the 100 pounds going off again. And then I said to him, and oh, by the way, now I'm seeing here there's a sickness, kind of an illness coming, and it's in your abdomen area. And it's coming up. It's not exactly right now, but it's coming. And that you're going to get as sick as you possibly. Now, I'm doing foreplay before that, right? I'm being, right. I'm building to it. As I said, I'm doing the Coles Notes version. Yep. And I said to him, so you're going to get sick, so sick you could not get sicker and not die.
Wow.
But you won't die, and you're going to lose more than 100 pounds. And I said to him, Tom, I'm thinking the losing the 100 pounds is the destiny. And I'm thinking that you can do this by hearing what I've told you and taking control of your body. Or not, get sick, lose more than 100 pounds, be as close to death as possibly you can get without dying, and then losing more than 100 pounds. And then I said, it's up to you. And you can do it the easy way or the hard way. And that's the way I gave him the information. Took a half an hour or so. Scared the hell out of him.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it was serious. Anyway, scared the hell out of him. And for a week, he lived on salary and then went back. So now Stephanie and Tom are going away on one of their famous dream vacations, and they go to Egypt.
Okay.
Tom's not well. He's got a problem in his stomach anyway. Tom's not well. They go to Egypt and they start touring the pyramids. While Tom was in one of the pyramids, he gets sick, collapses and faints, passes out. And they carry him out of the pyramid, and then back to the hospital or to the hotel, and then a doctor comes and checks him out, and he had some. I don't know all the technical stuff, but and the way Tom describes it now is he had a pseudocyst, whatever that meant, around his pancreas. It got infected, and then he went to the hospital in Egypt. While he was in the hospital at Egypt, he contracted the most potent superbug on the planet. 100% antibiotic resistant.
Oh, my God.
Means you get it, you die.
Oh.
No cure. Done. So Stephanie is freaked out. And Tom and Stephanie get medevac from Egypt to a special clinic in Germany. Tom is in total isolation. Everybody that comes around him wearing hazmat suits, stuff like that. And he's unconscious in a coma. And Stephanie. And Stephanie phoned me in the early part of December. And this actually, this what I'm just going to say now actually is in the book. Stephanie called me, and I had the worst flu that I had that I could ever remember. And I was laying in bed thinking, oh, I'm going to die. I just want to die. And then I hear the Skype bell ringing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, like an idiot, I get up and answer it. and it's Stephanie. But this is what I said to Stephanie. I said to her, I've been waiting for you. What took you so long? Because she had been on my mind for several days. And the first thing I said to her was, what took you so long? I've been waiting for you.
Oh, wow.
And that's in the book. Anyway, she tells me about Tom. And I said to her, first of all, he's not going to die. And we talked. And from that point onward, and until the whole 8 months, I was like a counselor to Stephanie. But the other thing is that I created a mind link with Tom when he was in a coma. And I knew what was going on with him on the inside. I knew his moods. I could sense how he was feeling. I could sense when his vital signs changed. I sensed when he was in crises. I sensed when he was okay. And I had a meeting with Stephanie every day. Oh, and incidentally, the other thing about Stephanie is that she's got a brain like Sheldon Cooper. You know Sheldon Cooper
from
the
Big Bang Theory. Yep.
She's got a brain like his.
Okay.
And a photogenic memory.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the time I had meetings with her every day, and every day she would repeat back stuff that I had said and that I had come up with. And she was giving me that feedback every day. So I knew when Tom was in trouble. I didn't understand the medical part, but I could describe what I was seeing in his body and how I felt about it, and could describe it. And then that could be interpreted and it was understood. After a while, and I don't know if I've done it today. I often use a lot of colloquialisms and funny ways of saying things.
Sure.
And I do that a lot in my work too. And I would say things like that when I was describing something going on with Tom, his sickness, and how his and how his vital signs had changed. After doing this for a few weeks, when the doctors were having conferences or giving Stephanie information, they started using the colloquialisms that I used. But they were the doctors in Germany, and I was in Toronto.
Oh, weird.
And they started using the same way of describing what was happening to him when they weren't giving the medical diagnosis. There was one time when now I set up a visualization, and it was a candle, a lit candle, and as long as the light was strong, the flame, I knew Tom was okay. I knew he was in a coma, but I knew he was okay. But if the flick, because I visualized that as his life force.
Okay.
So when I would see it, if the flame was okay, whatever was going on with him, I was all right. Because one day I got up and the flame looked like it was going to get blown out. It scared the hell out of me. And I talked to Stephanie, and I said to her, Tom is, oh, by the way, he had gone into septic shock.
Ooh.
No, no, not this time. No, I'm sorry. That wasn't that. No, that was another time.
Okay.
But and this time he was in some kind of big crisis, but not septic. He had 7 septic shock session episodes in that time, but this wasn't one of them. So I saw anyway, his vital signs were just going off the chart. He was openly sick, and they thought he was dying. And I said to Stephanie, Tom is cold. He's alone. He's in pain. He doesn't know where he is. He can hear people speaking, and he can hear people saying that he's going to die, and he's getting weaker, and he's letting go.
Oh, no.
And I said, Tom needs to see his daughters. Yesterday would have been a good day. Today is a good day. Tomorrow's not so good. If you wait longer, don't bother. And that's the harshest I've ever given information before. And that night, his daughters flew from California. And I knew something happened, because all of a sudden, the flame looked like it was going out. And all of a sudden, it came alive. And his daughters arrived. And they write about that in the book. Now, I did that. But there are other people that can do that, could have done that. My number at the Union Hall came up. Hey, Milne, it's your turn. Get the job. That really, no, seriously, that we're all sitting around in the Union Hall waiting for our turn, right? That was my ticket. So but there were a lot of people that could do that. But what's most important is that a psychic saw that, not me, a psychic. And when Tom came out of his coma and he was writing about it and talking about that very issue, he said that we prove absolutely in this that people in comas can hear, because you could hear. I could hear, Tom, he said, I could hear, and you knew that I could hear. And usually in those situations, the patient dies. And this time it doesn't. So now we know.
Yeah.
And now we know, and we can treat people this anyway. As time went on, I then said to Stephanie, you have had what you've experienced in your career since the time you graduated until right now. You have encountered every single type of problem that you are facing right now, this moment. The only difference between the problem that you're dealing with right now and the problems that you solved are the details. But the way you solve those problems, the concept is the same. And you can find a cure to this disease. While her husband was in a coma, dying of a SuperBug that had no cure. And Stephanie set out to find a cure. And she put together a collaboration of some of the greatest minds on the planet, the greatest scientists on the planet. And this was a worldwide collaboration of the greatest minds on the planet looking for a possible cure while the clock was ticking. And it turned out that anyway, and she had this amazing team around her. And I just want to take it a little bit more back to me for a second. When I first started doing this with Tom, I told Stephanie that I was really afraid to do this because I don't like medical things. I don't know anything about it. And I was so afraid I'd make a mistake and kill Tom. And she said, well, that's everybody's worry. that's on the team. And she said, well, what you have to realize, though, is that I have a team of experts, and they give me their information freely and openly, and they don't hold anything back. And I look at the information they give me, and based on the information they give me, I make the decision. It's your moral obligation for you to tell me absolutely everything with no holds barred, so that I can make the right decision. And she said, whatever happens, it's not your responsibility because it's my decision. And that was the first time in my life I was given permission to let it all hang out. And I didn't hold back. And it was just glorious to be able to just let go and not be worried about the consequences. And that was just a brilliant thing. Anyway, they kept Tom alive, and then Stephanie came to me and she said, well, we got it narrowed down to 3. The clock is ticking, right? We got it narrowed down to 3. And she said, I talked to everybody, and you're the last person. And she said, I'm just going to tell you about them. And I said, great. And she says, now the first one's called phages. And she started, and I said, that's the one. And she said, would you let me finish? But that's the one. Would you let me finish, Robert? And I said, okay. And she talked about it. And I said, okay. And then she said, now. And I said, that's the one. And here's the second one. And she starts. And I said, that's the second one. We go to the first one. That's the one. Anyway, she tells me that one. I say, nope, second one, first one. Then we look at the third one. And I say, nope, it's the first one. And then she said, why? And I said, because they look like little Pac-Man. And the Pac-Man attack the superbug, kill it, and eat it. And the name, and she said to me, that's what it does. And not on my word, but the last person that made the comment was me. And she made that decision after I said they were like Pac-Man. There was only one choice. And anyway, the Pac-Men actually are called phages. And phages are harvested from sewer water.
Really?
And the phage, it's excrement. And in their research, they discovered in Russia in the 1920s and 30s, Russians were experimenting with people that had bowel inner or lower organ infections. They were being injected or put in fresh stool. And the concept of the fresh stool is that the healthy bacteria will kill the unhealthy bacteria. They were getting some success in those days. And then, in 1940 or something, they invented a pill, penicillin. So, that stopped that research because, patients, you can have a turd or you can have a pill. I'd go for the pill myself.
Oh, yeah.
I that's that. So that's what stopped the research. Now it had been developed. So research laboratories around the world donated their already phages research. The American Navy, the American Army had done research on phages, and the FDA granted special releasing of that. And Tom was the very first person that was injected with these phages. When Tom was finally injected with these phages, he was hours away from death.
Wow.
Hours, like 3-4 hours. If he hadn't had the phages, he would not have lived the night before. And the doctors were quite afraid to do it. You know, they didn't want to be the guy to stick that. And when he was back in California, all the people knew Tom and Steph. And the doctors were afraid to, you know, they didn't want to kill this friend because Tom's a good guy.
Right.
Anyway, they decide, and as I said, Tom is, you know, hours from death. And they injected him IV and stepped back and looked, and 10 minutes later, his vital signs got stronger. So they gave him another shot, and then his vital signs got stronger. And then throughout the night, they were, you know, cranking him full. And the next morning, Stephanie came to see Tom, and she walked over to the bed, and Tom had come out of his coma, and he looked her in the eyes for a couple of seconds, but they made eye contact, and then Tom fell asleep. He didn't go in a coma, and he never went into a coma again. And over time, he's made a complete and full recovery. Back to the thing, a psychic, not just this psychic, but there's a lot of really good psychics that could have done that. And because that was done, the world has changed in the way they treat the SuperBug, because it is no longer a killer. It can be cured. And because of that way of thinking, they've then found that different substances can attack tumors, cancer tumors, and things like that, all because of The Perfect Predator, because of that book. And Tom and Steph are big spokespeople for that. The book called The Perfect Predator. Anyway, I got the call, but this is a call that a psychic can do, and other psychics will do it. And I share it with my brothers and sisters who do this work.
It's amazing. It's amazing, Robert. That's you keep saying any psychic can do it, but I mean, you have to know you were chosen to do it. That's the thing, that you were chosen to do it.
I'm not the only one. There's others. That's what I'm saying.
No, I know. I know you're saying that.
And the big deal about, okay, I did it. It was good for me, and it did. Yeah. And as a result of that, I get this is all that's been happening in my life because of what now we're talking. But I have to enforce that there are other people that can do it.
Right.
Not just me. And that's the part. I'm 70, almost 74. I'm not going to be around that long. But the younger ones now, they can do this work.
Sure.
That's what I'm thrilled about.
Sure. And you're here to pass that along to the younger generation. Obviously.
Which is the reason I came out of retirement.
Obviously. So if people want to get a hold of you, one of them.
Oh, yes.
If people want to get a hold of you and want to learn from you, how would they go about doing that?
You can, find me on my website, www.robertlindsaymilne.com. My own podcast is called My Side of the Crystal Ball. You can find that on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, iHeart, UK. I can't believe this. UK Paranormal, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and you can find out about my readings just through my website.
There you go.
And I forgot to tell you.
Yes.
We're doing a psychic class, a Robert Lindsy Milne psychic class, first time in 20 years. We're going to be doing it in February. So if you're interested, just come on to my website and take a look.
There you go. And we'll have links to all of that in the description of the show. So if you didn't catch all that when Robert said it, it'll be right there in the description. You could just click on it, follow it, and sign up. Most definitely. Robert, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Darkness Radio.
Thank you. Could I say my goodbye to your audience?
Yes, please do.
So everyone that's listening, please do good, stay safe, and above all, just be kind.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Robert Lindsy Milne has been our guest. And folks, again, I want to encourage you to dig into your psychic self, because there's got to be someone to take over. And heaven forbid, that's the way I'll put it, Robert, that you shouldn't be here anymore, because you are a treasure, sir. And we appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Robert Lindsy Milne for joining us today, and remind you to go out and get the book, The Perfect Predator, which also features his story having to do with Stephanie and Tom and that coma that Tom was in. Fascinating story, folks. And hope you'll read that book. Again, that link is in the description of this program, so go ahead and order that book and read the entire story. Fascinating how a psychic can link to a person in a coma and get that kind of result and communicate to someone who's in a coma in order to save them and save their lives from a devastating superbug and super disease. Folks, I want to remind you to take care of yourself and take care of each other this weekend. Do a little something for one another this weekend. Again, we're in the midst of winter, devastating cold and storms throughout the country this winter. And people need coats, they need hats, they need blankets, just whatever they need to get through winter. If you've got an extra $5 or you've got an extra coat or hat that somebody can use, mittens, whatever, be sure to drop them off at a local charity near you, or even contribute that extra $5, whether you text a charity near you and donate, or just drop off whatever money you can at a reputable charity to help someone get through the winter months, or even donate your services to a local charity that may be serving food to the needy or the homeless. Whatever you can do this weekend is greatly obliged or appreciated, as people are struggling out there and need your support. I myself plan on doing something a little extra special this weekend for someone in need. I would hope you would do the same. And I know I ask you to do something every weekend, but just a little something, just a little ripple in the pond, a little pebble in the pond can help out your fellow man and help us leave things a little bit better than what we found it. Because after all, that's what we have to do, set the example for future generations so that they continue to do that, and so on and so forth. I also want to thank our sponsors this week, Blue Chew, HelloFresh, and Microdose Gummies, for sponsoring the program. Again, without our sponsors, we're nothing on this program, and they help us keep the lights on and help us keep broadcasting these great programs to you. So we want to thank those sponsors as well. And I want to thank you, the listener, for continuing to listen to us on a weekly basis. Again, I want to send my love and appreciation to you guys for listening to us on a weekly basis. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be here doing this. And if it wasn't for you amazing people, I wouldn't be able to do the dream job of a lifetime. So I'm greatly indebted to you. I'm grateful to you every day when I wake up to come and do this job that I absolutely love. That's only done because you take your time to listen to my craft, what I do for a living. So I greatly appreciate it. I know Beer City Bruiser appreciates it. And again, we're so thankful for you for tuning into Darkness Radio. Tune in next Tuesday for more great programs. True Crime Tuesday coming up next Tuesday. And then again, next week, we will have, instead of supernatural news and dumb crime, stupid criminals on True Crime Tuesday, we're going to forego those next week. We're going to have a week of interviews next week. So don't think we've changed format or anything like that next week. We haven't. We're not doing some radical programming change or anything like that. I'm going to be getting ready for heart surgery coming up middle of February. I'm just going to take a little time to get some stuff ready. So next week, just a slight change of plans. We're going to do some interview shows next week. So next week, True Crime Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we'll have some interview shows for you. And then we're back to regular programming the week after. So hope you enjoyed next week's programs. I know I enjoyed them. And we'll be back next week with brand new shows and some good shows at that. So we'll see you next week. Thank you very much for listening to the best in paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio.